Today's episode of Dungeon Crawlers Radio is brought to you by Gamers Inn, your one-stop location for all your gaming needs. Located in Lehigh City, Utah, their fun and friendly staff will be more than happy to answer any of your gaming needs. Just remember, Gamers Inn, it's where adventures begin.
It's time to power up.
Autobots, roll out! Broadcasting live from the DCR studio.
Oh yeah!
The Geek Revolution starts here.
Excellent!
Get ready for the #1 hit geek radio show out there.
Well, it is impressive, isn't it?
Because it's time for Dungeon Crawlers Radio.
Let's get ready to rumble!
And now, the moment you've all been waiting for.
All right, everyone, welcome. We are here yet again from L2E. Previously I was in the bowels in the upper hallways with Dave Butler. I then found myself in some weird room with Dan Wells. And now here we are in another room, but with Christopher Husberg. Chris has been on the show before. If you don't know who he has written Duskfall, Dark Immolation, and soon the third book in that series, Blood Requiem, will be out. Now, my first question, because of that, how do you come up with titles? Because that seems to be the most difficult thing for me.
Yeah. No, for me too, honestly. I feel like so Duskfall was in the works for years. You know, I wrote the first draft in 2010. I want to say it did not have it had a working title, but it was super generic. The Rising is what it was, you know, and it didn't mean anything. You know, that's the most typical fantasy, like tropey stereotype title you could possibly imagine. So that was the working title for many years, mainly because I didn't want to put effort. I had no good ideas for a title. Yeah. But finally, when I was like, okay, I'd revised it a few times. A few years later, I'd revised it and sent it to some readers. They'd give me some feedback. I felt I was ready to like start shopping it around to agents and editors. I was like, okay, I guess now I need like a good title. And Skyfall had just come out, the James Bond movie Skyfall, and I was like, that is a cool title, you know. And it's kind of a trend these days to sort of mash. You know, you have Mistborn. Brandon Sanderson does this a lot. You have Warbreaker, Mistborn, where you mash two words together into one thing, and I think it's cool. I think it works, and it actually can really give like a good. Firefly, you know, Joss Whedon said the same thing about Firefly when he titled his TV show Firefly. It's sort of the two words combined. You know, you have fire, which is you know, aggressive, and fly, which is more of like a whimsical thing, and you put it together, and it also creates this image that is just completely apart from both of those things. Yeah. And so I think I like that idea, and so I just started coming up with words that had to do with the series as a whole, and kind of the themes and what was going on, and eventually I came up with Duskfall, and I love that title. I'm really happy with it. I think it works really well. Dark Immolation is kind of funny. It was the working title, and I was honestly I was halfway on board, halfway wanting to change it to something else, and then I saw it on the flap of Duskfall of the printed version, and I was like, oh, I guess that's what I'm titling it. When Duskfall came out, I hadn't. So that was fine. And Blood Requiem I'm really happy with that title too. So yeah, titles, you know, they definitely take more effort for me than I would like. I don't know why I think it should be easy. I don't know. It's silly, I guess, to think that it would be easy, but I have to sit there and think about it for a while. You know, it's like it's part of my job or something. I don't know.
I'm in the same boat. I don't give it a title. I don't give it a title till the end.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, when it's done, when a book is done, that's when I mean, because otherwise it's like, I don't know. Part of that's because I'm still a pretty heavy discovery writer. You know, as I've progressed in the series, I do a lot more outlining for each book than I did with Duskfall or any of my short stories or anything, for example. But I don't know. I still have to put. I have to finish the idea, you know, before I really before I can really put energy into having a good title.
Nice. Now, so where is the third book going? Because we've already kind of gone on the adventure through the first two books, and this is a 5-book series, if I remember right. So we're in the middle of the grand arc. So what's going to happen without giving away too much, and where are we going?
Yeah. One of the things I've done with this series is each novel I've sort of taken a different. What is the right word? Tone isn't exactly the right word. Neither is subgenre. But like Duskfall was mainly an adventure novel, right? The heroes are going on a quest, basically. You know, they're traveling, they're experiencing new environments and cities and magic and everything. And it was a quest, an adventure novel. Book 2 was a little bit slower paced. It's more of a political intrigue, religious intrigue novel that had definitely some heavy action, but also focused a lot on some of these more
Themes?
yeah, just slightly different themes. Yeah, And so book 3, it continues a lot of the religious and political stuff from the second book, but the main focus I had for book 3 is war. It's a war novel. And that's been actually a challenge for me. I've done a lot of research into different historical battles and armies, and how medieval and ancient armies fought. Yeah. I've been particularly interested in the Punic Wars, the second Punic Wars mainly, with Hannibal Barca, and that's been fascinating, and it's definitely heavily influenced the battles in Blood Requiem. But yeah, so it's a war novel. There's going to be a lot of big battles. So I'm excited with how that turns out. Book 4 so I'm actually working on book 4 right now. Book 3 is with my editor. I'm working on book 4, and that's turning out to be more of a kind of an espionage with hints of of horror, basically. Okay. Yeah. So.
Nice. So with it being the war novel and massive battles going on, how hard is it to kind of focus on that? Because, I mean, a massive war, there's tons of things going on. Bodies are clashing, swords and everything. Are you kind of pinpointing on the characters that are involved? Yeah. Or how are you doing that? Yeah,
it's that is a good question. Yeah, I've kind of compounded the problem for myself with the magic system, because the magic system, the main magic system in the books is pretty new. Yeah. Like, it hasn't been around for more than a couple decades. And even then, most people are not aware that it exists. And so fighting battles with, the main character, one of the main characters at this point, is pretty strong with this magic. Yeah. She can do a lot of things. She can cause a lot of damage. And so it's been actually a challenge to balance, what do battles look like from her perspective versus what do battles look like from the perspective of people getting kind of stomped by her powers. Yeah. And then what's the infantry level, like the heavy infantry that's just clashing with each other, they're not going to care about the big magic going on unless something, smacks them in the face randomly. But otherwise, they're worried about the guy who's about to stab them across from the, And so it's kind of been a challenge. So I have focused. I mean, a lot of it is from, one of these main characters' perspective, the one with the magic. But I think it's important to show the perspective of I mean, one of my favorite war novels is Heroes by Joe Abercrombie, and I think he does a great job. He does kind of a POV head hopping technique where for any given battle he'll jump around. In fact, what I love about how he does this is he's in one POV and then that person gets killed and he jumps to the POV of the person that just killed him. Okay. And then that person gets killed and he jumps to the POV of the person that just killed that person. And it's like this interesting technique that gives you a really great sense of the battlefield as a whole, because these aren't the main characters. These are very minor characters that you only see for sometimes only a few paragraphs, but it does give you a really great perspective on the battle. And so I do try to shift around perspective a little bit and to give perspective from both sides of any given battle. But it has been a challenge because the magic system, I don't want to make them too powerful, but they are powerful, Yeah.
No, I like the idea of jumping around. There's a couple, I can't remember the title of it, but it was a really great one where one chapter would focus on one side of the army, the other would be on the other, and like the one army would actually be dominating the other one, like they're throwing catapults and stuff like that, and then you get the aspect of these guys that are like fearing for their lives as these giant fiery rocks are hailing down on them. So So that idea is really interesting, and it helps you kind of feel the sense of mortality and how this battle's going out, because you're getting both sides instead of, oh, just the one guys are tromping through and surviving and winning.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is really important to show different perspectives, and because the other thing about battles that I think one of my goals with this series and with writing in general is I like great action scenes. I love a good fight scene, but I'm also not out to like glorify violence. Like that's not something I'm interested in doing. And so in some ways I focus on the grotesque aspects of war and how really just terrible it can be, and just devastating, and not just for the soldiers, but the countryside is being ravaged by these battles, and so this isn't just affecting the people who are fighting, but it's also affecting the people who live nearby, and if somebody owns that farmland, that land is gone from that battle. That's not gonna, so it's so there's a lot that I'm trying to keep in mind, and it's a war. Writing this novel, focusing on the war aspect and big battles has been definitely an interesting experience that it's fun,
Well, I mean, you bring up a good point. A lot of times when we read history or stuff about battle, we hear the death tolls, but what about the blood that was washing off into the water supply that is going to affect everyone that was drinking that, or maybe there were actually animals, or the farmland that's theirs, it's now ruined. It can never be. People can't plant their crops there, so there's a lot of interesting things that still apply the aftermath of that battle. So that's interesting. Let alone, is the army just leaving the bodies behind?
Right.
Wild animals that weren't there before that are now suddenly there because they're eating the dead. I mean, and that's a lot of things that we never hear about. So, I mean, if you're kind of including that, that's a very interesting aspect to put in there. Wow. Now, because your magic system is so unique, and correct me if I'm wrong, but really the individual it's almost like they're on drugs when they're doing. So how does that really come into play? Because, well, we know how people react when they're inebriated. I mean, sometimes their critical thinking, that's definitely not there, but their aim isn't on par or stuff like that. So how does that affect this magic? Because, I mean, to throw a fireball into a group and not destroy your own troops when you're high or drunk would probably not be as easy, but there at the same time there's Jackie Chan's Drunken Master, which is amazing even though he is.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. A lot of it comes down to research, and I guess you can extrapolate, what kind of research I've done into drugs and getting high at your own, at your own discretion. But there really are different sort of forms. Yeah, being drunk, it does it fuzzes you up. Yeah. You're not as, the word is not coming to mind, but like you're not coordinated. Your hand-eye coordination is not anywhere near what it was. But other drugs, there are stimulants, where they can make you sharper for a while. And there are other side effects, right? But they do have that effect where they can enhance you to an extent, Others, LSD, there are just a lot of different effects, psychedelic effects can occur where you're just completely removed from reality, and so it's been interesting to try and hash together the type of high, I guess, you would call that you get from the drugs from Faltira, which is the drug that characters in my books use to access this magic, and so in the books though it is more of a there is definitely kind of an ethereal, slightly psychedelic property to it, especially in the beginning when you first are taking it. But the more you take it, it becomes more of a stimulant that sort of sharpens your senses a little bit. And there are still pretty heavy side. I mean, it is very addictive, And the more you take it, the less those effects. It almost becomes more of a downer the more you take it, Where it was once a stimulant, suddenly it's not as effective as it was, So there's, there's like long-term effects to keep in mind as well. But yeah, it's and it also depends on the character. Some people are affected by chemicals differently, right? Like by their body chemistry reacts differently to different things, and that's true as well with different characters in the books, where some of them it takes effect really quickly and they are just sharp as a tack, and others that's not the case. So yeah.
So that brings up an interesting question, because you've had to do a lot of research for this. Now, is there a point, because you're married, is there a point where your wife's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I mean,
yeah, I get that from my wife a lot, because I write about drugs, and I write about, my fantasies usually has a darker tone to it, and every once in a while my wife looks at me and is like, "Who are you? Like what who's beneath this like mask that I know as a husband and writing this like ridiculous stuff, and so there is kind of that level of people, you think you know somebody, and then you read what they write and you don't know them, and that's okay, and that's not, but yeah, so there is a level of like also, to be fair, my wife is very supportive of the writing, and she's one of my best readers, to be honest with you. She's very honest and can be very open, so I'm grateful to have a spouse that can be that way. But yeah, and she does, and she also gets very mad at me when I kill off certain characters. She's not happy. She loves happy endings, and she, unfortunately, she married the wrong person to get a happy ending in a book, at least. So yeah.
no, and that's one thing I do like, because that's one thing that's always kind of bugged me, and I know a lot of people get upset about that, like with Star Wars. We had these great heroes, and one mess after another, they always got out. Up until, what was it, Vector Prime that was written, and Chewbacca died. Of course, that's no longer canon,
Right,
but then Disney comes along, and they kill off Han Solo, and everyone's like, ah! That's reality. I mean, that's life. There's no way you could go into a war and not someone die. Yeah. So as much as it sucks to have a character die, I really like that. And, when I saw, the first time I experienced that was in Dragonlance.
Oh, yeah.
When Sturm Brightblade dies. And you're just like, what? No! You get that. But that cemented him like, this is war. It's going to happen. And he sacrificed himself. And it was great. It was beautiful. I mean, sometimes you can still have death where it actually lends more to the story. So what were some of the books that really inspired you growing up that made you want to do this?
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking of killing characters off, I was a fan of George R. R. Martin since I've been a fan since high school. I've been reading A Song of Ice and Fire. So the king, exactly, yeah. There's the old joke, if Stephen Moffat and Joss Whedon and George R. R. Martin walk into a bar, everybody dies or something. I can't remember how the joke goes, but yeah, those three are kind of pretty. They're pretty renowned for being brutal to their characters, and I loved Game of Thrones. A Song of Ice and Fire, I guess, is what I was. Is what the books are called, and I loved Game of Thrones because it subverted my expectations there, and I'd seen characters die in books before. It's not like he revolutionized that necessarily, but just the brutality and the fact that he's killing off these point of view characters that you become so attached to as a reader was pretty. As a high school kid, I was like, I'd never seen that before. So definitely George R. R. Martin. But going back a little further, I'll give you just a kind of a brief, I guess, history of books that some of my favorites that have really influenced me. I loved Redwall. Brian Jake's Redwall series growing up. One of my all-time favorite young adult series is called The Lost Years of Merlin by T.A. Barron, and I love those books. I read them in high school, and it's basically you have Merlin as the ancient wizard, right, in Arthurian legend and in a lot of the adaptations, but you don't have a lot of what was Merlin like as a kid and as a teenager, and this is that story, and it's great. I loved it. I think there's some of my favorite books that I've read and very influential. George R. R. Martin for sure. Robert Jordan, of course. I read Robert Jordan in high school. I was Wheel of Time. Brandon Sanderson, Joe Abercrombie. I've mentioned already. Yeah. So I mean, like I said, I do write darker fantasy. And so I wouldn't classify myself as grimdark necessarily. In fact, I wouldn't. But there's darker things, and I actually, this is a term I heard at World Fantasy a few years ago, but I think grim hope is a term I've heard, and I think that's what my books fall under, because a lot of bad things happen in my books, but there is an aspect of hope and like human goodness in some people, and I think that for me that's important. I like that, and I love Abercrombie. I like Mark Lawrence. I love their books. And I like the nihilistic sort of twist in a lot of them. I enjoy reading that, but it's not what I'm writing, and that's okay. Yeah.
No, I mean that glimmer of hope is great. As much as Game of Thrones is amazing, it just you don't have any hope. Because it's like, okay, I like this character, he's dead.
Yep.
I like that character, they're dead. It's like as soon as you start liking a character, they're dead.
It's rough.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So Duskfall is out. Dark Immolation's out.
Yep.
So it's June 5th.
June 5th. Yeah.
The third book comes out. So this is perfect. You can go out, pick up 2 books, read through them, and then you got the third one. You don't have to wait another year.
A few months, yeah.
I mean, you'll need to wait for book 4 and 5.
Yeah. But I'm on a pretty good schedule with them. I mean, book 4 will come out June of 2019, and book 5 June of 2020. Like, unless barring some apocalypse, that's what's going to happen. So I'm on track to do that, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So go out, pick up these 2 books if you haven't already. If you have them, pick up Blood Requiem when it comes out in June, and support Chris in his writing. And where can they find you next? What cons, or even where can they find you on the web?
Yeah. So I'll be. Let's see. I'll be going to Pensacon in February, later in February. But let's see. I'm trying to think of. Phoenix Comic Con in May. I'll be at Worldcon. I go to Worldcon every year usually, and World Fantasy as well. Salt Lake Comic Con, Gen Con. I'll be at Gen Con as well. So yeah, please by all means come find me. I'm usually on panels, but yeah, I love going to conventions. Oh, and I'll be doing a book event, a release event in June for Blood Requiem, and probably a book tour as well. That's kind of still in the works, but I'm thinking we're gonna make that work. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, find them online. Check them out at your local convention. I mean, Gen Con's awesome, full of games. But check them out and definitely get the books because they're worth reading. And with that said, we'll catch you next time.
BayCon 2018 returns this Memorial Day weekend to the San Mateo Marriott San Francisco Airport for its 36th year as the longest fan-run science fiction and fantasy convention in the San Francisco Bay Area. This year's theme is Patchwork Fandom, Stitching the Generations Together, and will focus on costuming and programming items aimed at connecting younger and older generations of SFF fandom through shared interests. BayCon's writer guest of honor is Tamara Pierce, recipient of 2013's Margaret A. Edwards Award for The Song of the Lioness and protector of the small quartets. Her newest novel, Tempest and Slaughter, has just been released in hardcover and ebook. BayCon 2018 will also welcome artist guest of honor Margaret Organ Keene, fan guest of honor Christopher J. Garcia, and Toastmaster M. Todd Gallowglass. Come join us for a weekend of fun and fandom. Get your membership at www.baycon.org.
You're listening to Dungeon Crawlers Radio. Please subscribe and follow them on Facebook or Twitter, please. No, we're even promoting these filthy idiots. Who doesn't like them? Who doesn't like anyone? No, they're our friends, please. Our friends. No, shut up. Please subscribe.